solitude which so ruthless a judge haunted, at the silence which so awful a voice filled. My head swam as I stood erect. I perceived that I was sickening from excitement and inanition. Neither meat nor drink had passed my lips that day, for I had taken no breakfast, and, with a strange pang, I now reflected that, long as I had been shut up here, no message had been sent to ask how I was, or to invite me to come down. Not even little Adele had tapped at the door. Not even Mrs. Fairfax had sought me. Friends always forget those whom fortune forsakes, I murmured, as I withdrew the bolt and passed out. I stumbled over an obstacle. My head was still dizzy, my sight was dim, and my limbs were feeble. I could not soon recover myself. I fell, but not on the ground. An outstretched arm caught me. I looked up. I was supported by Mr. Rochester, who sat in a chair across my chamber threshold. "You come out at last," he said. "Well, I have been waiting for you long, and listening. Yet not one movement have I heard, nor one sob. 5 minutes more of that death-like hush, and I should have forced the lock like a burglar. So, you shun me. You shut yourself up and grieve alone. I would rather you had come and upbraided me with vehemence. You are passionate. I expected a scene of some kind. I was prepared for the hot rain of tears. Only I wanted them to be shed on my breast. Now a senseless floor has received them. Or you drenched your handkerchief. But I err. You've not wept at all. I see a white cheek and a faded eye, but no trace of tears. I suppose, then, your heart has been weeping blood. Well, Jane, not a word of reproach, nothing bitter, nothing poignant, nothing to cut a feeling or sting a passion. You sit quietly where I have placed you, and regard me with a weary, passive look. Jane, I never meant to wound you thus. If the man who had but one little ewe lamb that was dear to him as a daughter, that ate of his bread and drank of his cup, lay in his bosom, had by some mistake slaughtered it at the shambles, he would not have rued his bloody blunder more than I now rue mine. Will you ever forgive me? Reader, I forgave him at the moment, and on the spot. There was such deep remorse in his eyes, such a true pity in his tone, such manly energy in his manner, and, besides, there was such unchanged love in his whole look and mine. I forgave him all, yet not in words, not outwardly, only at my heart's core. You know, I am a scoundrel, Jane. Ere long, he inquired wistfully, wondering, I suppose, at my continued silence and tameness, the result rather of weakness than of will. Yes, sir. Then tell me so roundly and sharply. Don't spare me. I cannot. I am tired and sick. I want some water. He heaved a sort of shuddering sigh, and, taking me in his arms, carried me downstairs. At first, I did not know to what room he had borne me. All was cloudy to my glazed sight. Presently, I felt the reviving warmth of a fire. For summer as it was, I had become icy cold in my chamber. He put wine to my lips. I tasted it and revived. Then I ate something he offered me, and was soon myself. I was in the library, sitting in his chair. He was quite near. How are you now, Jane? Much better, sir. I shall be well soon. Taste the wine again, Jane. I obeyed him. Then he put the glass on the table, stood before me, and looked at me attentively. Suddenly he turned away, with an inarticulate exclamation, full of passionate emotion of some kind. He walked fast through the room, I do not wish to act against you, I said, and my unsteady voice warned me to curtail my sentence. Not in your sense of the word, but in mine. You are scheming to destroy me. You have as good as said that. I am a married man. As a married man, you will shun me. Keep out of my way. Just now, you have refused to kiss me. Jane, will you hear reason? He stooped and approached his lips to my ear. Because, if you won't, I'll try violence. His voice was hoarse, his look that of a man who is just about to burst an insufferable bond and plunge headlong into wild license. I saw that in another moment, and with one impetuous frenzy more, I should be able to do nothing with him. The present, the passing second of time, was all I had in which to control and restrain him. Of movement, of repulsion, flight, fear would have sealed my doom, and his. But I was not afraid, not in the least. I felt an inward power, a sense of influence, which supported me. The crisis was perilous, but not without its charm, such as the Indian, perhaps, feels when he slips over the rapid in his canoe. I took hold of his clenched hand, loosened the contoured fingers, and said to him soothingly, "Sit down. I'll talk to you as long as you like, and hear all you have to say, whether reasonable or unreasonable." He sat down, but he did not get leave to speak directly. I had been struggling with tears for some time. I had taken great pains to repress them, because I knew he would not like to see me weep. Now, however, I considered it well to let them flow as freely and as long as they liked. If the flood annoyed him, so much the better. So I gave way and cried heartily. Soon I heard him earnestly entreating me to be composed. I said I could not while he was in such a passion. "But I am not angry, Jane. I only love you too well, and you have steeled your little pale face with such a resolute, frozen look. I could not endure it. Hush now, and wipe your tears." His softened voice announced that he was subdued, so I, in my turn, became calm. Now he made an effort to rest his head on my shoulder, but I would not permit it. Then he would draw me to him. "No, I do love you," I said, "more than ever. But I must not show or indulge the feeling, and this is the last time I must express it." "The last time, Jane? What, do you think you can live with me and see me daily, and yet, if you still love me, be always cold and distant?" "No, sir, that I am certain I could not, and therefore I see there is but one way. But you will be furious if I mention it." "Oh, mention it. If I storm, you have the art of weeping." "Mr. Rochester, I must leave you." "For how long, Jane?" "For a few minutes while you smooth your hair, which is somewhat dishevelled, and bathe your face, which looks feverish. I must leave Adele and Thornfield. I must part with you for my whole life. I must begin a new existence among strange faces and strange scenes. Of course, I told you you should. I pass over the madness about parting from me. You mean you must become a part of me. As to the new existence, it is all right. You shall yet be my wife. I am not married. You shall be Mrs. Rochester, both virtually and nominally. I shall keep only to you, so long as you and I live. You shall go to a place I have in the south of France, a whitewashed villa on the shore of the Mediterranean. There you shall live a happy and guarded and most innocent life. Never fear that I wish to lure you into error, to make you my mistress. Why did you shake your head? Jane, you must be reasonable, or, in truth, I shall again become frantic." His voice and hand quivered, his nostrils dilated, his eyes blazed. Still, I dared to speak. am certain Jane will agree with me in opinion when she knows all that I know. Just put your hand in mine, Janet, that I may have the evidence of touch as well as sight to prove you are near me, and I will, in a few words, show you the real state of the case. Can you listen to me? Yes, sir, for hours, if you will. I only ask minutes, Jane. Did you ever hear or know that I was not the eldest son of my house? That I had once a brother older than I? I remember Mrs. Fairfax told me so once. And did you ever hear that my father was an avaricious, grasping man? I have understood something to that effect. Well, Jane, being so, it was his resolution to keep the property together. He could not bear the idea of dividing his estate and leaving me a fair portion. All, he resolved, should go to my brother, Roland. Yet, as little could he endure that a son of his should be a poor man. I must be provided for by a wealthy marriage. He sought me a partner betimes. Mr. Mason, of a West India planter and merchant, was his old acquaintance. He was certain his possessions were real and vast. He made inquiries. Mr. Mason, he found, had a son and daughter, and he learned from him that he could and would give the latter a fortune of £30,000. That sufficed. When I left college, I was sent out to Jamaica to espouse a bride already courted for me. My father said nothing about her money, but he told me Miss Mason was the boast of Spanish Town for her beauty, and this was no lie. I found her a fine woman, in the style of Blanche Ingram, tall, dark, and majestic. Her family wished to secure me, because I was of a good race, and so did she. They showed her to me in parties splendidly dressed. I seldom saw her alone, and had very little private conversation with her. She flattered me, and lavishly displayed for my pleasure her charms and accomplishments. All the men in her circle seemed to admire her and envy me. I was dazzled, stimulated, my senses were excited, and, being ignorant, raw, and inexperienced, I thought I loved her. I married her. Gross, grovelling, mole-eyed blockhead that I was. My bride's mother I had never seen. I understood she was dead. The honeymoon over, I learned my mistake. She was only mad and shut up in a lunatic asylum. There was a younger brother too, a complete dumb idiot. The older one, whom you have seen, and whom I cannot hate, whilst I abhor all his kindred, because he has some grains of affection in his feeble mind, shown in the continued interest he takes in his wretched sister, and also in a dog-like attachment he once bore me, will probably be in the same state one day. My father and my brother Roland knew all this, but they thought only of the £30,000, and joined in the plot against me. Jane, I will not trouble you with abominable details. Some strong words shall express what I have to say. I lived with that woman upstairs 4 years, and before that time she had tried me indeed. Her character ripened and developed with frightful rapidity. Her vices sprang up fast and rank. They were so strong, only cruelty could check them, and I would not use cruelty. What a pygmy intellect she had, and what giant propensities. How fearful were the curses these propensities entailed on me. Bertha Mason, the true daughter of an infamous mother, dragged me through all the hideous and degrading agonies which must attend a man bound to a wife, at once intemperate and unchaste. My brother, in the interval, was dead, and at the end of the 4 years, my father died too. I was rich enough, yet poor to hideous indigence. A nature at the most gross, impure, depraved I ever saw was associated with mine, and called by the law and by society a part of me. known what a sullied name you bear, nor what a filthy burden is bound to you. You may take the maniac with you to England, confine her with due attendance and precautions at Thornfield, then travel yourself to what clime you will, and form what tie you like. That woman who has so abused your long suffering, so sullied your name, so outraged your honour, so blighted your youth, is not your wife, nor are you her husband. See that she is cared for as her condition demands, and you have done all that God and humanity require of you. I acted precisely on this suggestion. My father and brother had not made my marriage known to their acquaintance, because in the very first letter I wrote to appraise them of the union, having already begun to experience this great extreme disgust of its consequence, and, from the family character and constitution, seeing a hideous future opening to me, I added an urgent charge to keep it secret, and very soon the infamous conduct of the wife my father had selected for me was such as to make him blush to own her as his daughter-in-law. Far from desiring to publish the connection, he became anxious to conceal it as myself. To England then I conveyed her. I hired Grace Poole from the Grimsby retreat. She and the surgeon, Carter, who dressed Mason's wounds that night he was stabbed and worried, are the only two I have ever admitted to my confidence. Mrs. Fairfax may indeed have suspected something, but she could have gained no precise knowledge as to facts. Grace has, on the whole, proved a good keeper, though owing partly to a fault of her own, of which it appears nothing can cure her, and which is incident to her harassing profession. Her vigilance has been more than once lulled and baffled. The lunatic is both cunning and malignant. She has never failed to take advantage of her guardian's temporary lapses. Once to secrete the knife with which she stabbed her brother, and twice to possess herself of the key to her cell, and issue therefrom in the night time. On the first of these occasions, she perpetrated the attempt to burn me in my bed. On the second, she paid that ghastly visit to you. I thank Providence, who watched over you, that she then spent her fury on your wedding apparel, which perhaps brought back vague reminiscence of her own bridal days. But on what might have happened, I cannot endure to reflect. When I think of the thing which flew at my throat this morning, hanging its black and scarlet visage over the nest of my dove, my blood curdles. And what, sir? I asked while he paused. Did you do when you had settled her here? Where did you go? What did I do, Jane? I transformed myself into a will-o'-the-wisp. Where did I go? I pursued wanderings as wild as those of the March spirit. I sought the continent, and went devious through all its lands. My fixed desire was to seek and find a good and intelligent woman, whom I could love, a contrast to the fury I left at Thornfield. was glad to give her a sufficient sum to set her up in a good line of business, and so got decently rid of her. Now, Jane, why don't you say, "Well, sir, I have not done"? You are looking grave. You disprove me still, I see. But let me come to the point. Last January, rid of all mistresses, in a harsh, bitter frame of mind, the results of useless, roving, lonely life, corroded with disappointment, and sourly disposed, against all men, and especially against all womankind, for I began to regard the notion of an intellectual, faithful, loving woman as a mere dream. Recalled by business, I came back to England. On a frosty winter afternoon, I rode in sight of Thornfield Hall, a bored spot. I expected no peace, no pleasure there. On a stile in Hay Lane, I saw a quiet little figure sitting by itself. I passed it as negligently as I did the pollard willow opposite to it. I had no presentiment of what it would be to me, no inward warning that the arbitress of my life, my genius for good or evil, waited there in humble guise. I did not know it, even when, on the occasion of Monsieur's accident, it came up and gravely offered me help. Childish and slender creature, it seemed as if a linnet had hopped to my foot and proposed to bear me on its tiny wing. I was surly, but the thing would not go. It stood by me with strange perseverance, and looked and spoke with a sort of authority. I must be aided, and by that hand, and aided I was. When once I had pressed the frail shoulder, something new, a fresh sap and sense, stole into my frame. It was well I had learned that this elf must return to me, that it belonged to my house down below, or I could not have felt it pass away from under my hand, and seen it vanish behind the dim hedge, without singular regret. I heard you come home that night, Jane, though probably you were not aware that I thought of you, or watched for you. The next day I observed you, myself unseen, for half an hour while you played with Adele in the gallery. Impatiently I waited for evening, when I might summon you to my presence. An unusual, to me, a perfectly new character, I suspected was yours. I desired to search it deeper and know it better. You entered the room with a look and air, at once shy and independent. You were quaintly dressed, much as you are now. I made you talk. Ere long, I found you full of strange contrasts. Your garb and manner were restricted by rule. Your air was still often diffident, and altogether that of one refined by nature, but absolutely unused to society, and a good deal afraid of making herself disadvantageously conspicuous by some solecism or blunder. Yet, when addressed, you lifted a keen, a daring, and a glowing eye to your interlocutor's face. There was penetration and power in each glance you gave. When piled by close questions, you found ready and round answers. Very soon you seemed to get used to me. I believe you felt the existence of sympathy between you and your grim, cross master, Jane, for it was astonishing to see how quickly a certain pleasant ease tranquilized your manner. I saw you had a social heart. It was the silent schoolroom. It was the tedium of your life that made you mournful. I permitted myself the delight of being kind to you. Kindness stirred emotion soon. Your face became soft in expression, your tone gentle. I liked my name pronounced on your lips in a grateful, happy accent. I used to enjoy a chance meeting with you, Jane. At this time, there was a curious hesitation in your manner. You glanced at me with a slight trouble, a hovering doubt. You did not know what my caprice might be, whether I was going to play the master and be stern, or the friend and be benignant. I was now too fond of you, often to simulate the first whim, and when I stretched my hand out cordially, such away some tears from my eyes. His language was torture for me, for I knew what I must do, and do soon, and all these reminiscences, and these revelations, and his feelings, only made my work more difficult. No, Jane, he returned. What necessity is there to dwell on the past, when the present is so much surer, the future so much brighter? I shuddered to hear the infatuated assertion. You see now how the case stands, do you not? He continued. After youth and manhood past half in unutterable misery, and half in dreary solitude, I have, for the first time, found what I can truly love. I have found you. You are my sympathy, my better self, my good angel. I am bound to you with a strong attachment. I think you good, gifted, lovely. A fervent and solemn passion is conceived in my heart. It leans to you, and, kindling in pure, powerful flame, fuses you and me in one. I should have appealed to your nobleness and magnanimity at first, as I do now. Open to you plainly my life of agony, describe to you my hunger and thirst after a higher and worthier existence. Show to you, not my resolution, that word is weak, but my restless bent to love faithfully and well, where I am faithfully and well loved in return. Then I should have asked you to accept my pledge of fidelity, and to give me yours. Jane, give it to me now. A pause. Why are you silent, Jane? I was experiencing an ordeal. A hand of fiery iron grasped my vitals. Terrible moment, full of struggle, blackness, burning. Not a human being that ever lived could wish to be loved better than I was loved. And him who thus loved me, I absolutely worshipped. And I must renounce my love, an idol. One drear word comprised my intolerable duty. Depart. Jane, you understand what I want of you. Just this promise. I will be yours, Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester, I will not be yours. Another long silence. Jane, recommenced he with a gentleness that broke me down with grief, and turned me stone cold with ominous terror. For this still voice was the pant of a lion rising. Jane, do you mean to go one way in the world, and let me go another? I do. Jane, bending towards me and embracing me, do you mean it over? I do. And now, softly kissing my forehead and cheek, I do, extricating myself from restraint rapidly and completely. Oh, Jane, this is bitter. This is wicked. It would not be wicked to love me. It would be wicked to obey you. A wild look raised his brows, creased his features. He rose, but he forbore yet. I laid my hand on the back of a chair for support. I shook, I feared, but I resolved. I must endure this sorrow. I retired to the door. You are going, Jane? I am going, sir. Jane, Mr. Rochester. Withdraw then. I consent. But remember, you leave me here in anguish. Go up to your own room. Think over all I have said. And Jane, cast a glance on my sufferings. Think of me. He turned away. He threw himself on his face on the sofa. Oh, Jane, my hope, my love, my life. He broke in anguish from his lips. Then came a deep, strong sob. I already gained the door, but, reader, I walked back as determinedly as I had retreated. Knelt down by him. I turned his face from the cushion to me. I kissed his cheek. I smoothed his hair with my hand. God bless you, my dear master, I said. God keep you from harm and wrong, direct you, solace you, reward you well for your past kindness to me. Little Jane's love would have been my best reward, he answered, without forth flashed the fire from his eyes. Erect he sprang. He held his arms out, but I evaded the embrace, and at once quitted the room. Farewell was the cry of my heart as I left him. Despair added, farewell forever. That night I never thought to sleep, but a slumber fell on me as soon as I lay down in bed. I was transported in thought to the sense of childhood. I dreamt I lay in the red room at Gateshead, that the night was dark, and my mind impressed with strange fears. The light that long ago had struck me into syncope, recalled in this vision, seemed gliding to mount the wall, and trembling to pause in the centre of the obscured ceiling. I lifted up my head to look. The roof resolved to clouds, high and dim. The gleam was such as the moon imparts up to vapours she is about to sever. I watched her come, watched with the strangest anticipation, as though some word of doom were to be written in her disk. She broke forth as never moon yet burst from cloud. A hand first penetrated the sable folds and waved them away. Then, not a moon, but a white human form shone in the azure, inclining a glorious brow earthward. It gazed and gazed on me. It spoke to my spirit. Immeasurably distant was the tone, yet so near it whispered in my heart. My daughter, flee temptation. Mother, I will. So I answered after I had waked from the trance-like dream. It was yet night, but July nights are short. Soon after midnight, dawn comes. It cannot be too early to commence the task I have to fulfill, thought I. I rose. I was dressed, for I had taken off nothing but my shoes. I knew where to find in my drawers some linen, a locket, a ring. In seeking these articles, I encountered the beads of a pearl necklace Mr. Rochester had forced me to accept a few days ago. I left that. It was not mine. It was the visionary bride's, who had melted in air. The other articles I made up in a parcel, my purse containing 20 shillings. It was all I had. I put in my pocket. I tied on my straw bonnet, pinned my shawl, took the parcel and my slippers, which I would not put on yet, and stole from my room. Farewell, kind Mrs. Fairfax, I whispered, as I glided past her door. Farewell, my darling Adele, I said, as I glanced towards the nursery. No thought could be admitted of entering to embrace her. I had to deceive a fine ear. For aught I knew, it might now be listening. Drearily, I wound my way downstairs. I knew what I had to do, and I did it mechanically. I sought the key of the side door in the kitchen. I sought, too, a phial of oil and a feather. I oiled the key and the lock. I got some water. I got some bread, for perhaps I should have to walk far, and my strength, sorely shaken of late, must not break down. All this I did without any sound. I opened the door, passed out, shut it softly. Dim dawn glimmered in the yard. The great gates were closed and locked, but a wicket in one of them was only latched. Through that I departed. It, too, I shut, and now I was out of Thornfield. A mile off, beyond the fields, lay a road which stretched on in the contrary direction of Millcote. A road I had never travelled, but often noticed, and wondered where it led. Thither I bent my steps. I skirted fields and hedges and lanes till sunrise. I believe it was a lovely summer morning. I know my shoes, which I had put on when I left the house, were soon wet with dew. But I looked neither to the rising sun, nor smiling sky, nor wakening nature. A weakness beginning inwardly, extending to the limbs, seized me, and I fell. I lay on the ground some minutes, pressing my face on the white, up to the wet turf. I had some fear, or hope, was forced to sit, to rest me under the hedge. And while I sat, I heard wheels. I saw a coach come on. I stood up and lifted my hand. It stopped. I asked where it was going. The driver named a place a long way off, and where I was sure Mr. Rochester had no connections. I asked for what sum he would take me there. He said 30 shillings. I answered I had but 20. Well, he would try to make it 2. He further gave me leave to go get into the inside, as the vehicle was empty. I entered, was shut in, and rode on its way. Gentle reader, you may never feel what I then felt. May your eyes never shed such stormy, scalding, hard-wrung tears as poured from mine. May you never appeal to heaven in prayers so hopeless and so agonized as in that hour left my lips. For never may you, like me, dread to be the instrument of evil to what you wholly love. Chapter 27. 2 days are past. It is a summer evening. The coachman set me down at a place called Whitecross. He could take me no farther for the sum I had given, and I was not possessed of another shilling in the world. The coach is a mile off by this time. I am alone. At this moment I discover that I forgot to take my parcel out of the pocket of the coach, where I had placed it for safety. There it remains. There it must remain. And now I am absolutely destitute. My eye roved over the sullen swell and along the moor edge, vanishing amidst the wildest scenery, when at one dim point, far in among the marshes and the ridges, a light sprang up. I watched to see whether it would spread, but no. As it did not diminish, so it did not enlarge. It may be a candle in a house, I then conjectured, but if so, I can never reach it. It is much too far away, and were it within a yard of me, what would it avail? I should but knock at the door to have it shut in my face. Having crossed the marsh, I saw a trace of white over the moor. I approached it. It was a road or a track. It led straight up to the light, which now beamed from a sort of knoll amidst a clump of trees. Firs, apparently, from what I could distinguish of the character of their forms and foliage through the gloom. My star vanished as I drew near. Some obstacle had intervened between me and it. I put out my hand to feel the dark mass before me. I discriminated the rough stones of a low wall. Above it, something like palisades, and within, a high and prickly hedge. I groped on. Again, a whitish object gleamed before me. It was a gate, a wicket. It moved on its hinges as I touched it. On each side stood a sable bush, holly or yew. Entering the gate and passing the shrubs, the silhouette of a house rose to view, black, low, and rather long. But the guiding light shone nowhere. All was obscurity. In seeking the door, I turned an angle. There shot out the friendly gleam again from the lozenged panes of a very small, latticed window. The aperture was so screened and narrow that curtain or shutter I noticed these objects cursorily only. In them there was nothing extraordinary. A group of more interest appeared near the hearth, sitting still amidst the rosy peace and warmth suffusing it. 2 young, graceful women, ladies in every point, sat, one in a low rocking chair, the other on a lower stool. A strange place was this humble kitchen for some occupants. Who were they? They could not be the daughters of the elderly person at the table, for she looked like a rustic, and they were all delicacy and cultivation. "Listen, Diana," said one of the girls. "Franz and old Daniel are together in the night time, and Franz is telling a dream from which he has awakened in terror. Listen." And in a low voice she read something, of which not one word was intelligible to me, for it was in an unknown tongue, neither French nor Latin. Whether it was Greek or German, I could not tell. "Is there any country where they talk it that way?" asked the old woman, looking up from her knitting. "Yes, Hannah, a far larger country than England, where they talk in no other way." "I wonder when St. John will come home, Mary," said the girl, Diana. "Surely he will not be long now. It is just 10, looking at a little gold watch she drew from a girdle. "It rains fast. Hannah, will you have the goodness to look at the fire in the parlour?" The woman rose. She opened a door, through which I dimly saw a passage. Soon I heard her stir a fire in an inner room. She presently came back. I thought the 2 girls were very alike. Both were fair complexioned and slenderly made. Both possessed faces full of distinction and intelligence. One, to be sure, had hair a shade darker than the other, and there was a difference in their style of wearing it. Mary's pale brown locks were parted and braided smooth. Diana's duskier dresses covered her neck with thick curls. The clock struck 10. I groped out the door and knocked at it hesitatingly. Hannah opened. "What do you want?" she inquired in a voice of surprise, as she surveyed me by the light of the candle she held. "May I speak to your mistress?" I said. "You had better tell me what you have to say to them. Where do you come from?" "I am a stranger." "What is your business here at this hour?" "I want a night's shelter, in an outhouse or anywhere, and a morsel of bread to eat." Distrust, the feeling I dreaded, appeared in Hannah's face. "I'll give you a piece of bread," she said after a pause, "but we can't take in a vagrant to lodge. It isn't likely." "Do let me speak to your mistresses." "No, not I. What can they do for you? You should not be roving about now. It looks very ill." "But where shall I go, if you drive me away? What shall I do?" "Oh, I'll warrant you know where to go and what to do. Mind you don't do it wrong, that's all. Here is a penny. Now go." Here the honest but inflexible servant clapped the door to and bolted it within. This was the climax. A pang of exquisite suffering, a throe of true despair, rent and heaved my heart. Worn out indeed I was. Not another step could I stir. I sank on the wet doorstep. I groaned. I wrung my hands. I wept in utter anguish. Oh, this spectre of death! Oh, this last hour, approaching in such horror! Alas, the isolation, this banishment from my kind! Not only the anchor of hope, but the footing of fortitude was gone, at least for a moment, but the last I soon endeavoured to regain. "I can but die," I said, "and I believe in God. Let me try to wait his will in silence." These words I not only thought but uttered, and, thrusting back all my misery into my heart, I made an effort to compel it to remain there, dumb and still. "All men must die," said a voice, quite close at hand, "but all are not condemned to meet a lingering and doom, such as yours would be if you perished here of want. Who or what speaks? I asked, terrified at the unexpected sound, and incapable now of deriving from any occurrence a hope of aid. A form was near. What form? The pitch dark night and my enfeebled vision prevented me from distinguishing. With a loud, long knock, the newcomer appealed to the door. "Is that you, Mr. St. John?" cried Hannah. Yes, yes. Open quickly. Well, how wet and cold you must be. Such a wild night as it is. Come in. Your sisters are quite uneasy about you, and I believe there are bad folks about. There has been a beggar woman. I declare she's not gone yet. Lay down there. Get up, for shame. Move off, I say. Hush, Hannah. I have a word to say to the woman. You have done your duty in excluding. Now let me do mine in admitting her. I was near and listened to both you and her. I think this is a peculiar case. I must at least examine into it. Young woman, rise and pass before me into the house. With difficulty I obeyed him. Presently I stood within that clean, bright kitchen on the very hearth, trembling, sickening, conscious of an aspect in the last degree, ghastly, wild, and weather-beaten. The two ladies, their brother, Mr. St. John, the old servant, were all gazing at me. St. John, who is it? I heard one ask. I cannot tell. I found her at the door, was the reply. Is she ill, or only famished? Famished, I think. Hannah, is that milk? Give it to me, and a piece of bread. Mary's hand removed my sodden bonnet, and lifted my head. I tasted what they offered me, feebly at first, eagerly soon. Not too much at first. Restrain her, said the brother. She has had enough. And he withdrew the cup of milk and the plate of bread. A little more, St. John. Look at the avidity in her eyes. No more at present, sister. Try if she can speak now. Ask her her name. I felt I could speak, and I answered. My name is Jane Elliot. Anxious as ever to avoid discovery, I had before resolved to assume an alias. And where do you live? Where are your friends? Sir, I can give you no details tonight. Hannah, said Mr. St. John at last. Let her sit here at present, and ask her no questions. In 10 minutes more, give her the remainder of that bread and milk. Mary and Diana, let us go into the parlour and talk the matter over. They withdrew. Very soon one of the ladies returned. I could not tell which. A kind of pleasant stupor was stealing over me as I sat by the genial fire. In an undertone, she gave some directions to Hannah. Ere long, with the servant's aid, I contrived to mount a staircase. My dripping clothes were removed. Soon a warm, dry bed received me. I thanked God, experienced amidst unutterable exhaustion a glow of grateful joy